We have two nerdy dads. I think we're on episode 27, and with me, as always, is Jason Applegate. Say hey, Jason.
Hey.
Of nerdy dads this week.
Well, I think we'll start off with just what happened this last weekend in my neck of the woods. We just had the Motor City Comic-Con over this last weekend, and I was able to cover all 3 days. And it was a lot of fun, and I thought we'd spend some time talking about some of the stuff that I saw, some of the things that I didn't really include in the articles, so a little bit of behind-the-scenes kind of stuff, and go from there. All right. First off, it was the first time. This is only the third time that I've covered it, and it's the first time that I have done so with video. So that was something new because I finally went with a friend of mine who, Scott, came with me, and he ran the camera. Before this, we just did audio interviews, and then we'd post the audio, and I thought it was fine, and it was actually a good way to kind of get into it because, you know, you don't feel as nervous if you're not on camera and all that jazz. But it was really pretty exciting to be able to do it with video. We had some technical issues that kind of came in where, you know, the camera didn't, you know, the video didn't start early enough. So if you go and check out the videos, there's a couple of them that we kind of start off with a still image, and eventually the video kicks into it. And I think, you know, I also was watching them, and I'm like, yeah, I need to like do the whole close it down thing with like repeating who I'm talking to and close it out. But you're in the, you know, I was so in the moment, and I felt like, you know, I was talking with these guys, and I just wanted to kind of thank them, you know, when it was over, and about the whole, like, because, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having fun doing it. And I liked it. It was a lot of fun. I thought this year I got 7 interviews, which was fantastic because last year I got 2. And so it was really cool to be able to get that many. So yeah, I didn't know how to close it out. I was too busy thanking them, you know, for doing the interview and just sort of excited about how it went. And I really thought that this year it went. So to get 7 this year was really cool. And all of the interviews went really well. I was watching some other people's interviews at the Comic-Con, and they interviewed some of the same actors. And I really felt like, you know, theirs might have been really done technically. Like I said, since it was the first time and we're both, you know, amateurs, we're just kind of, you know, rolling with it, and we don't have the best equipment and all that jazz. But I felt like our interviews, like the interviews themselves, went much more fluidly. They weren't as stagnant. I felt like they were more conversational. And I liked, and it seemed to me from the few that I watched, and I didn't watch a bunch, that the actors seemed to enjoy them more. I don't know. I was really happy with the way that it went this year. I thought it was, I had work, I was exhausted, but it was really cool, really successful. And there's a couple of stories that I want to tell, sorry. But, you know, what did you think? I mean, coming from somebody outside of it that wasn't there, what were your thoughts about the stuff that we ended up getting through?
The interviews, specifically Michael, John and his work on CW's Arrow, but I really didn't know anything about him beyond that. John Wesley Shipp, I kind of knew a little bit from back in the 90s Flash. Right. Lou Ferrigno is just awesome, but it was always awesome to see him interact. Bullock, I've always known him as Boba Fett, even though there's been like 5 people who played Boba Fett. He was the first. But I'm just not a big fan of the TV show, so that was not my favorite. I really did like the panel that you did, Chloe Bennett. I really enjoyed seeing that. I've seen panels, but for some reason, I guess it's one of those things where if you're not there, you kind of like, oh well, I missed it. There's no chance I'll ever see it. But then having you record, like, oh cool, then I do get to see it. So that was kind of cool. And I just finished season 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Your review, Once Upon a Time, those first episodes are so hard. They're not good. Not good. So I gave up on it for a long time, forced myself more, got about halfway through the first season. I'm like, ah. And then about the time that Bill Paxton comes on board, it's like, this is good now. This gets really good. And then it really ends up, obviously, I've got season 2 to binge watch, which is nice because I'm really big into the binge watching. So it was cool to see her panel. I don't think I would have seen that you uploaded that.
Yeah, I thought the panel was fantastic. And it was only her, which a lot of times that can make a panel kind of drag because you've just got, one person and they're not like bouncing off of each other. But I have to say, like you, with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I didn't really like it to start with. I kind of, liked it as it picked up. I didn't finish season 1 all the way through. Like, let me phrase it this way. I hadn't watched every single episode. I had seen the finale when they went all Hydra and all that stuff, and it was really cool. But I missed some in between there and haven't gone back to watch them. And I have to say, and I admitted this and I tweeted it out, that, like, Skye drove me crazy. I really could not stand Chloe Bennett's character. She just bothered me. I don't know what it was. If it was just sort of the stereotypical, like, who's this, computer hacker that's, fighting this system and is questioning authority, and it just seemed sort of trite, or if it was Chloe's performance that I wasn't digging, or what it was, but I really just could not stand her as a character, and her relationship with Ward, was just sort of like, ugh. I ended that panel, and Chloe Bennett is interacting with the guests. She has this wonderful self-deprecating humor where she's just giving herself a hard time. She talks about her audition process, and she talks about breaking her elbow in one of the fight scenes, and so endearing and so relatable. You could tell that she loved her job, she loved the show, and she loved her fans. That, like, I felt really bad that I was so harsh on her and her character, that I was like, you know what? I'm going to give her character another chance. I'm going to watch season 2. I like it because I liked her character I liked her as a person so much that I really want to like her character now. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That is cool. And I think part of the problem is the beginning of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I was watching it week to week. Granted, it was for 2 weeks, and that was enough for me. It was that bad, and it was the writing. The scientists, the British scientists, hated him. They were so annoying. Skye, Chloe Bennett, annoying, because you're right. It was just a stereotype. It wasn't a character. It was a stereotype. And it was awful. Like this hipster chick who was a computer hacker. Blah. Then you had the Muscle as Ward. Ming-Na, I can't remember her character's name. She was at least intriguing. Yeah. And then Coulson. Yeah. Coulson was like the only one you're relatable, but he was already in the movie, so you knew what you were getting. It was awful. I think as it went on, and we have this relationship with Coulson and Skye.
Yeah, the father-son thing. Or father-daughter thing.
And I think she's become, the character has become much more likable. And then seeing that panel, man, she's so cool, just down to earth, very nice. And what you don't get to see, because I'm an editor and I'm a jerk and I didn't want to watch the rest of Jason's video, is after she was standing around and she was, I don't know who it was, but she was just talking to them a little bit. It just seemed like it was a fan who just came up to her randomly and was, when the camera's turned off, a lot of times you'll hear about celebrities who just like hit kids and club babies. She wasn't performing for the panel.
Yeah, what the person was that came up, and I couldn't discern it clearly, but it was I think it was someone who had written like some fan fiction, like a teleplay fan fiction, because she was handed that, and then this fan greeted her, and that even goes a little further, I think. I mean, because a lot of people might be like, oh yeah, great, thank you, trash can, but she was like, she realizes that these fans love what she's doing, and she appreciates that, and I think that is admirable about her. And I was really honestly surprised that we were able to because I know I wasn't there for Cameron Baikonovan's panel. She's Catwoman on Gotham. I wasn't there for that one, but I had heard that for hers, there was nothing allowed. Like, you couldn't record, you couldn't take pictures or anything. And it was her Comic-Con, so it might have had something to do with that, the fact that she's never done a panel before. But
is she young? Is she underage?
That's true too. I think she is. I think she's under 18. Yeah. So that's probably an aspect of it too. So in getting back to the interviews and stuff, but I do agree with you. I think the Chloe Bennett thing was probably one of the coolest things. It certainly has been one of the most popular things that we've but it is that the agency that handled it, I thought this was their second year doing the con, and I think they learned a lot from the first year. But they were awesome. They really helped me out a lot, and they were great to work with. But it was very clear, which is a good thing, who was going to give interviews and who wasn't. And basically, all the big shots were off limits. Like I wasn't going to get any Walking Dead people because actually AMC forbid the Walking Dead people to even do interviews. So they were out. You knew you weren't getting William Shatner. You knew you weren't getting Chloe Bennett. You knew you weren't getting Cameron Baikonova. There, all the big names that were the headliners, you just knew you weren't going to get. And they communicated that clearly with you, which was nice. But then when I came up and I said, hey, what about this name? What about that name? They said, hey, let's go check it out. And they walked me right down there and went up and asked the person if it was okay, asked their handler or their agent or whoever was there if it was okay. And I'd wait around for like 5-10 minutes maybe, because I mean, they're there to sign autographs and meet their fans and frankly, to make some money. So, you don't want to get in the way of that. Let them do their thing, and then they fit you in, and people would wait while we did our interview, and then we'd be done, and then they'd pick it back up again. But it was great. It worked really, really well. Really well. So I was really happy with that. I agree with you. My favorites were of my interviews were Michael Rowe, and Jeremy Bulloch was like surprisingly really funny. I mean, I didn't know what to expect with him anyway, but he had this sort of dry, subtle that you saw in the interview a little bit. But when I had my son come up and meet him, and then the next day my daughter come up and meet him, it was the same. Like, he was the same, and he was just great with the kids too, which was fantastic to see. And then my other favorite was I really enjoyed Terry Farrell. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan. In fact, at one point she asked me when Michael Dorn came on the show, and I was like, I don't know. I'm not one of those guys. It's like, you remember in episode number 32 when, and then she was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, which was, I thought her answers were really good, even though I think some of my questions threw her off a little bit. I think she didn't expect them, but I also thought that she was very genuine. It wasn't some of the other actors that I interviewed, the interview was a performance. It was, and they were putting on a bit of a show, and I didn't get that feel from any of those three: Bulloch, Michael Rowe, and Terry Farrell. Michael Rowe was awesome. It just felt like a conversation. I felt like I could have gone, if I wasn't so busy, I could have gone back up to him and just, chatted away with him about a bunch of other things, and he'd have been really cool with that. So he was my favorite out of all of them. But all three of those guys were good. There were a couple that were sort of odd, I guess, and interesting. And I'm not going to name them by name because I don't want to, kind of like hate on anybody or anything like that. But there was one that I finished at the end of Friday, and I was really excited about interviewing this particular actor. And if you watch the interview, you can probably figure out who I'm talking about. But his answers he was hilarious, but he was so funny that it would throw me off of what my next question was going to be. But once it was over, he was done. He didn't even really want to do mine, but he did, because that's what he's there for. And he, you know, but towards the end, it was just sort of like, okay, we need to be done with this. And I felt like I wasn't on my A game either. And so I really wish that one would have gone a little bit better. And then the thing that you also don't see is that his agent got real snippy with us. Like she kind of tracked us down a little bit and kind of gave us the third degree. Like she really was about like, did you ask permission and all this? And we went through the right channels. We totally did everything like we were supposed to. And you know, and he seemed like he was, you know, open for the interview ahead of time. Didn't seem like there was any kind. We did have to do the interview quite a bit later than the first time we asked because he had to end up going away for a photo shoot and then coming back. So maybe that had something to do with it as well. But we had gotten permission, and but this particular agent had gotten her feathers ruffled that she wasn't specifically asked. So I kind of, at the end of the day, I went back to the agency and asked them like, hey, you know, is this going to be okay? Like, can we still put this up? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. No, you know, don't worry about it. But I just kind of kept waiting like, you need to take that interview back down because you didn't actually get the permission, blah, blah, blah. But thankfully that never happened. I think overall it went pretty well, but it wasn't as good of an experience as I would have liked it to be. And then you don't see it on camera either. On camera, this actor was great. He was, you know, engaged and genuine, but the before and after when the camera wasn't rolling was total cold shoulder. It just was sort of like, okay, you know, I'm done now, get out of here. And I was like, all right, get this thing going. And I was really bummed about it because I really didn't care one way or the other about actually interviewing this particular, you know, person, because it was just sort of like, yeah, whatever. Like it's pretty cool, I guess. I'm not a personal fan. So, but I thought, well, hey, it's another opportunity. Let's do it. So those were a couple of the experiences that I didn't care for that really me. We were there early and we're walking around just kind of getting a lay of the land and trying to figure out what to do and who we want to talk to and all that stuff. And so we're walking around where the artists are too. And I come around to where there's Adams prints, you know, because he's the big guy that's going to be there, the big comic book guest that's going to be there. And so we just kind of stop and I start looking at some of the prints, and this voice I hear is like, hey, there's plenty to be looking at. Why don't you just move along? And I was like, okay. And I look over and it's this older guy who says that to us. And I walked around and we were talking to other vendors. I was also really sort of cautious about that. Like, hey, like, I know you guys are getting up. Like, I don't want to be all up in your business. You know, is this okay that we were looking around? And they were all like, great and fine. So it made me think, even lo and behold, I come back around. Guess who it is that had accosted us? It's Neil Adams, like himself. And I was just totally disappointed because I was like, you know, I was thinking I might want to get his autograph, you know, and writer and stuff. And his autographs were going to be $30. So that saved me $30. I was like, dude, I was really, really surprised that was the case. And I was really bummed because I had a lot of respect for that guy. And I just felt like the way he treated us, you know, it didn't seem like we were being that intrusive on anything.
Yeah, I believe he was here at Wizard World in Vegas, and I didn't attempt to approach him, but walking by his table, nobody else was approaching him either, and it was very odd. It seemed like he was definitely putting off this aura of old man, stay off my grass.
Yeah.
Like, why are you acting that way? Now, a lot of the other artists I was going up to, if I liked their work, I was talking to them, hanging out with them, asking questions. If they were busy, I'd left them alone so they could meet with customers.
Right.
But approaching him, yeah, it was awkward.
Yeah, I never for him. And it's really kind of strange because he's responsible for a lot of the DC characters in the the way that we envision them now. You know, like he sort of didn't necessarily create a lot of them, like Stan Lee created a lot of them, but he's responsible for the way in which we view them now. Green Arrow, Green Lantern, and even Batman, making Batman less campy was, I mean, we credit Frank Miller with that a lot. I mean, he took him really dark, but really Neil Adams was one of the first to kind of get him out of the that realm of like, you know, the anti-shark bat spray kind of stuff. But yeah, I was really disappointed. The only other disappointments I really had were more of like opportunity disappointments. I was bummed I didn't get to interview Dean Cain. I thought he would have been a really cool interview. He seems like a great guy. The other thing that was cool about him is he's from Michigan. You know, he's from Mount Clemens, Michigan. And I was looking forward to, you know, asking him some questions about that. The other thing was I didn't even get to see Catwoman, Cameron, but I always want to call her Carmen. Cameron was bummed about that because I just sort of wanted to, like, you know, catch a glimpse of her, but her line was so long and she's probably so little that she's like behind them all and you couldn't see a thing. And I was busy, and is the other thing. And then the last one was, well, again, I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, who played Dr. Crusher in Star Trek The Next Generation. And what I wanted to ask her about was something I'd heard about in the panels, which was that she, after season 1, was upset with one of the writers for what she felt were some implications that were very sexist and racist. That was in his writing, like, you know, some subtext there. And she basically had said either he goes or I do, and they kept the writer. And so there's a year, I guess, of Star Trek The Next Generation that she is not Dr. Crusher, that another actress is. And then what ended up happening is, I guess, that writer ended up leaving. Patrick Stewart said, we need to get her back. And they brought her back into the fold about that, and how that all transpired. And you know, I just thought it was pretty admirable of her to do that, and what she thought, and had things changed, you know, since then, did she feel. And so, especially with how well I felt the Terry Farrell interview had gone. But unfortunately, she was under the weather. That was one of the reasons she wasn't taking a lot of interviews. And I totally understand that, like, the colds were going around like crazy, you know, in Michigan because of the weather's. But that was a huge disappointment. But overall, I wouldn't say huge. I shouldn't use that word. But overall, it was great. I had a great time. You know, Scott and I had a good time doing video for the first time. Cade, my son, got to do video for one of the interviews, and he did a pretty solid job. He got a little tired, and the camera started to go that way a little bit, but he kept us in frame the whole time, which was pretty good. So it was kind of fun to be able to do that on Family Day. And it was fun interacting with all the fans and things like that. Couple have for people, if you go to Comic-Con, whether it's, you know, Motor City Comic-Con or, you know, wherever you happen to be, you know, when it comes to your backyard, is get an artist to do a commission. I did that this year for the first time, and I loved it. We had the kids come up. They took a picture of the kids, and I had them draw the kids as superheroes, and I had the kids pick their superheroes. And of course, you know, Cade, as he rightfully should, picked Batman for his. And Sabrina is debating between She-Hulk and Squirrel Girl. Those are her two favorites lately. And so she ended up going with She-Hulk. And the drawing that they did, they were some local artists. It wasn't very expensive. It just was fun, and it was a cool experience. I suggest that as something that I think a lot of people don't really think of asking or shopping for, is to have some of those artists do a commissioned piece. And you can have it done on a piece of paper like we did, where you can frame it, or you can have them do one of those blank covers to a comic book. A friend of mine had to do some of those for him. And the other thing I would suggest is, if any of us out there, any of our viewers out there, you know, please interview some of these. What I felt like really helped me was I did a lot of research beforehand. And I looked at the character or the actors' bios that were on the press release. But the press release thing that they give you in your hands, the paper copy of it, is detailed as what they had online. And so I would read these other things, and the reason I felt like some of my interviews maybe went better than some of the other ones out there was because I asked them questions that had to do with things that they were, as people, were interested in. And went beyond just the questions they probably get 1,000 times. Start with the shows. You start with, what do people want to hear? This is what they know about you. This is what they want to hear. But then I tried to find something that got them to talk about something that was personal for them. With Lou Ferrigno, it was the fundraising that he does, the charity work that he does for the hearing aids. With Michael Rowe, was when I talked to him about how he got his start in comedy. And he just lit up and went off on this whole tangent, and talked about that. And I thought it worked really, really well. And I tried to do that with each one of them. The only one I felt like that didn't work with as well was John Wesley Shipp. When we talked about Flash, and I wanted to talk to him about some of the other stuff that he had done, and I kind of thought he would go into, he'd done some theater and stuff too, and I thought he would go in that direction a little bit, but he just kind of wrapped it back and talked about what I literally heard him talking to the person who interviewed him right in front of me talked about. And another little behind the scenes moment that was funny about John Wesley Shipp is when we started our interview, he came out from behind the table, and we had our camera ready, and I was ready, and he starts going like this. And I'm like, dude, what are you looking for? And he's like, I'm looking for the light. He's like, but there is none. And I was just like, okay. It just was an odd moment, and I just was surprised, and everything with him was very much more like he had these sort of prepared, rehearsed kind of answers. I still think he was pretty genuine, and I felt like we had good energy, but I feel that wasn't something that he had sort of prepared and said several times before, that was my Comic-Con experience. The only other story that I have was that Scott and I got to have an opportunity to do a favor for one of the guests that was there. Apparently, a media guest was a little bit frazzled, and she needed some cigarettes. And so her handler couldn't leave to get those. And I happened to know this person, not the media guest, the handler. And so she asked us if we would go and make a run and get these very particular kinds of cigarettes. So we had to find a smoke media guest, and she was fantastic. She was very grateful, very thankful. But it was really funny because she said this was her words, was that, yeah, she had an interaction with a fan who was a fire hose of weirdness, which I thought was just a great example. Like, she had just been doused with a fire hose of weirdness, and it had just freaked her out. And it made me think about how often that might happen to a lot of the media guests, particularly the women, and how often they might encounter something like that. So it was kind of a cool experience that we got to sort of help this person out, and that she was very grateful for it, and we got to do something that was kind of cool. And I didn't write about it because I didn't want to put it out there, in print. But I thought it was too cool of an experience not to share it all. And I actually asked if it was okay if we shared it, and told her that I wouldn't, put her name into it or anything like that. And she was totally cool with that, which was nice for her to sort of give us that permission to share that story too.
It's cool. Was this handler related to Nerdlocker?
Yes. But I don't want to give her name, because I also meet up with her, and she was great, and definitely was helpful as well with regards to knowing the behind the scenes, like who was giving interviews and who wasn't, and all that stuff too.
Very cool. Sounds like you had a blast.
I did. did. I totally had a lot of fun. It was a very rewarding experience, and I hope next year is just as good.
So what's up next?
Well, a little bit of news, right? I mean, let's talk about the Captain America images that were released, particularly of Crossbones, which I've always kind of liked him as a villain. I just think he's cool looking. I like his mask, and I thought they've done a pretty good job with it. I don't know. What did you think of the images that you saw?
I've never really been a huge fan of reading the comic book. I don't want to say I'm not a huge fan of Captain America because it's like, what are you, communist? It's like, no, it's not. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. And to me, it's in stark contrast to the Suicide Squad photos that were released with those characters. And I know Suicide Squad was staged, whereas Captain America was on set. But I'm like, the Suicide Squad looks so cheesy, 90s awful. They got Crossbones correct. I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think them going with this sort of like helmety, skull and crossbones thing instead of the the mat, like the cotton or fabric mask that's from the comic books, was a good way to do that, to not go cheesy, So I liked that. I liked the body armor, and then they had some pictures of him without his mask on, and he's got the the burns on his face from Winter Soldier, which makes sense. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. I guess the latest image, and I didn't get a chance to check this out, is Captain America like tossing him like really far, or some effect like that. So it sounds like it's cool. I'm looking forward to Civil War. I'm hoping it's as good as 2 was. I really thought Winter Soldier was one of the best one of the best Marvel films that's come out. One of my friends said it was Oscar worthy. I think that's a little bit far, but it was good. It was solid storytelling. So I'm kind of excited about that, and I'm with you. I'm a lot nervous about Suicide Squad. A lot nervous.
Yeah, DC. I don't know. And then they came out with some more news recently in the movie related with Batman versus Superman, and that Lex Luthor is the brains. Duh, we knew that. And it's rumored that his muscle might be Doomsday, which I think Doomsday is a fantastic character. I think the Death and Life of Superman was a fantastic story arc back when superheroes really didn't die. So it was like, oh my God, they killed him. It's crazy. But to have him actually being controlled by somebody, and the relationship I read was that Lex Luthor will be the Grand Moff Tarkin to Doomsday's Darth Vader.
Doomsday from the beginning is that he, in Death of Superman, and I haven't read a lot of Doomsday stories since then, but in Death of Superman, he's just this sort of mindless brute force. And so while it's kind of cool to see Superman just this thing that's just going to destroy anything in its path, this sort of force of nature, that's kind of cool to watch, but it's not an interesting story. And then this reminds me very much, and I hope it's not as awful as this, but as the Bane from Batman and Robin, which was the muscle and it was just, but that was different in that Bane in the comics was this mastermind. He wasn't just a physical specimen, but he broke Batman psychologically as well. And you just reduced him to this, brute. So I hope it's not as bad as that. It's kind of closer to who Doomsday is. There was a Death of Superman animated. I think it was called Superman Doomsday, where Luthor discovers Doomsday's like prison and sort of accidentally in a Frankensteinian kind of way, like he wants to figure out what's in there so badly, releases this evil on the world. And I thought with the animated, film, it worked okay. But I hear what you're saying. I don't know. I mean, it certainly Doomsday would be a villain that is strong enough that it would be a cause for Batman and Superman to join forces against, and it might make for some cool fight scenes. But I kind of am with you. I don't know. I'm skeptical about it too.
That's and it's DC being DC. Who knows what DC is doing?
Yeah, with mine, because they seem to be doing so well with their television series. I mean, Arrow has been great. Flash was fantastic. I heard the finale was wonderful. It was last night. I didn't get a chance to see it. I've only seen literally 2 episodes. And it is a little CW. I mean, it's definitely kind of teeny bopper, and the 2 episodes that I've seen, it gets a bit cheesy. It's got some pretty, kind of cliche types and things like that. But it is what it is. And if you recognize it for that, you can enjoy the other aspects of it. I feel like their incarnations of the supervillains and superheroes have been pretty solid. And I'm looking forward to more of them. And they're just they're just shooting them out like crazy, which is really cool to see. And I think what they're looking at doing next, that's the other bit of news we want. It just came out, is season 2. There's rumors that it's going to be a sort of multiverse thing, that Flash is going to be kind of traveling to these other universes. And I think that has got such a potential for cool. Like it's got such a great, potential for having these characters come into this television show. And the cool thing about multiverse is that you can do things with characters and not have any kind of ramifications. You can get somebody off. You can have somebody who's normally a good guy be a bad guy. You can do a different gender for a character, and people are like, ooh, that's kind of cool. And the authenticity, people don't get their underwear in a bunch because that's not how that's supposed to be, and it allows you some fun creativity. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, but I'm more looking forward to when it's released on Netflix so I can binge watch all of season 1, because I have not caught any of it besides the 2 episodes I watched.
Everybody else is just doing it so well. They started with the Arrow, very successful. They brought in a character, Barry Allen, had a good successful run, spin it off to his own show, had some crossover, very nice. Now they brought in Ray Palmer this year on Arrow. I thought that worked out really well. Now they've announced they're doing another spin-off, The Legend of Tomorrow, which, to be honest, it looked intriguing. I thought there were elements of like a Doctor Who thing, which I am not a fan of Doctor Who. I know you are. So I was very leery of that. Interested in the team that'll be on there for The Legends of Tomorrow. We're talking Hawkgirl, obviously the Atom, White Canary, who I wasn't a big fan of her as the Black Canary, so I'll be curious. Rip Hunter, Captain Cold, Heatwave, and Dr. Martin Stein, Firestorm. So I'm very curious how that's going to go. It looks like the first main antagonist is going to be Vandal Savage.
Fits.
So I'm not terribly familiar with all those characters. I know some better than others. Yeah. But I got to give the CW the benefit of the doubt for all of that, because they've done a bang-up job so far.
Yeah, and that reminded me, the other DC television series that's supposed to be coming out that I saw a trailer for, Supergirl. Now, that's not on the CW, I don't think, is it? That's on something.
Surprisingly on CBS, the old person's channel, which is not, it's on CBS. But it was interesting because seeing some of the choices they're making, like she's very open about who she is, which is cool because that's more Supergirl. Obviously, Superman doesn't do that. And the one that got me as interesting was they made Jimmy Olsen, he's black.
Yeah.
And no problem with that, but I'm like, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And there was one, I can't remember what it was, which I was like, oh, okay, interesting choice. I have to watch the trailer again to see what it was. I was very interested.
I think what was the most intriguing to me about that was that they're definitely going for a female audience with this, which I think is part of why you feel the CW feel to it, because they definitely cater to a female audience with Arrow and Flash, but it's more of the, aren't these guys good looking and wouldn't you want him as your boyfriend, kind of a draw to it. And you have the relationship things that are very much the teen to 20s style like love interests and all that, all that sort of soap opera drama. And Supergirl, and you could be Supergirl. Like, she's just like you guys are, except she can catch planes, and save them from crashing into a fiery ball. I also thought that the other part that I thought was intriguing was, she kind of leaks it, and when she saves the plane, but then just sort of, from what I could gain from it, at least, it seems like she's just gonna not try to hide it. And I kind of like that, because the whole secret identity has become so cliche that it might be fresh and nice to have something different from that. And I'm also glad that she's not in the new 52 costume, because I hate that costume.
And I'm familiar with Supergirl. My main knowledge is, again, going back to the death and life of Superman. I believe she was just Supergirl. Like, she didn't hide who she was. She was dating Lex Luthor at the time, which was odd. But she didn't hide who she was. She didn't try and have any kind of separate identity. She was Supergirl. And she was known as Superman's cousin, but they obviously had no idea. She knew Clark Kent, but Clark Kent wasn't known to be any relationship to her at all. So it feels like that's where they're going. I don't know if that's her current story arc now with wherever they are. That's what I feel like they're doing.
There have been so many, and I don't know tons about Supergirl, but I'm pretty sure that there have been so many incarnations of her as a character that there's a bunch of different ways that she's been portrayed, and her relationship to to Clark. In some stories, she's Kryptonian. In others, she's like from the neighboring planet. And that she is actually related to Kal-El. That she is cousin from Krypton, and has
along those lines. It's like interesting.
So Jimmy knows Superman's I possibly too. It seems like they're implying that you could go with that direction too, that he just knows Superman. But yeah, it's I think it's got potential. I definitely don't think I'm its target audience. But I'm not I'm not Arrow's target audience per se either, or Flash's. But I can still enjoy aspects of them, which is cool. So yeah,
you're getting old. That's why.
I know.
You need to say
One was like, your shirt's color blocking, and I'm like, color blocking? I'm like, that sounds awful. Is that anything? In my mind, I'm thinking, is that anything like what blocking? With stuff. Sounds awful. But apparently it's not. Apparently it's like a fashion thing where you just take blocks of color and they don't have to match or whatever, just kind of go coolly together. So I hope it wasn't an insult, but I still am not sure. Yeah.
Well, speaking of being old, they are restarting a franchise that I think you and I both have quite a fondness for.
Yeah.
Back in 1979, Mad Max was released.
Right.
And it was part of, if you don't know, it was part of Australia trying to get a film industry. Made Mad Max with a then pretty much unknown Mel Gibson.
Right.
It's very post-apocalyptic, very raw movie. I saw them out of order. I saw Beyond the Thunderdome first.
Yeah, that's the one we grew up with. Yeah,
exactly. That was when I saw the original Mad Max, I was kind of weirded out because I'm like, wait, where's all the desert? And I don't understand. There's actually roads and stores, and so it took me a while to wrap my brain around that as a young Jimmy Palmquist. But and then saw Road Warrior last, which to me is one of the best action flicks ever. But it's no children should be anywhere near that thing. So when they announced Fury Road was actually finally being released into theaters, because it's been about 15 years in the making. Because I know they were going to try and get it with Mel Gibson being Mad Max again, and basically didn't work out. So it is literally, you sit down, credits start, and they're very similar to the credits in the trailer, where it's room, room. You see Warner Brothers. You see a name, I guess it's Miller, I can't remember, the Miller whoever production, and the cheesy 80s graphic of Mad Max comes on, and you are 2 hours of high octane, your your heart is through the roof. If you have caffeine, let alone any illicit upper drug like that, is going to explode. The music and the action on screen, there is CG. People keep saying there's no CG, which I don't understand why they say that. There is clearly CG, but most of the stunts are real. Like people were in danger, and they made it so beautiful. But you're on the edge of your seat driving home because I was still so amped up from the movie. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in one of the last V8 Interceptors. What am I going to home? And luckily I got myself in control, and we were fine. Man, it was high octane. The thing I keep saying is I don't understand how George Miller, who is in his 70s, is able to make a movie like this, where you see other directors, and I pick on Steven Spielberg for this, who made Jaws. I mean, a very horror thriller shark movie. He can't make that movie anymore. He's definitely softened. I'm not saying he doesn't make good movies anymore. George Miller in his 70s, not a problem. Every piece of money, change, dollars, whatever that they gave him to make this film is up on the screen. You are not going, man, I did not get my money's worth. No. You got your money's worth and more. And the best news of the whole weekend, he wants to make more. Again, in his 70s, after the toll it would take to direct this film, he wants to make more. I'm stoked. And they already have a name for it, Mad Max: The Wasteland, which seems like the perfect name for anything post-apocalyptic.
So is this film a reboot or is it a sequel?
George Miller himself said it's not a reboot. It's not a sequel. It's sort of a continuation. None of these Max movies are sequels. They're just moments in Mad Max's life that take place in this world.
Okay, I'll buy it.
I thought that was a way to look at it. Now, there is a fan theory out there, and I totally do not subscribe to this. I think this is one of the dumbest fan theories I've ever heard, so if you're the one that came up with it, suck it, monkey. They're clearly volunteer that he's Max until the very end, and when he does say, my name is Max, it's sort of like a forced, I'm trying to think of a name, Max. It's the little wild thing in The Road Warrior who had the boomerang. They were saying that this is his character and this is his story. Now, to me, that means you didn't watch all of Road Warrior. And when he, the narrator, is the Wild Thing kid, says at the end, and then I took over the group and I became the leader. Max doesn't do that. And this character that's Tom Hardy is clearly not doing that. I guess in your wildest imagination, you could somehow dream up that he's on his journey to go lead the group that left in Road Warrior. But I'm like, no, you're not understanding your Mad Max history. Go watch the movies. So that bothered me. But I'd like to go with George Miller when he says, no, it's just an individual Max story. I love this universe a lot, so I wanted to revisit it.
Is it as stylized as the trailer was? Like, it's just got this sort of like style to it. Like, it's just...
Each Max movie he's made has a different feel to it. This one, even more so. I'd say, if anything, it's closest to Thunderdome, but that's maybe just because of scope. Because both the first two movies were kind of in the same region area, and this one, like Mad Max, they kind of explore a little bit more of that world. But it's like, I can't say things are prettier because, man, it's a brutal, ugly world. But things are a little more polished in the movie, and that might be that he's had 30 years to think about what he wanted to do with these characters and how he wanted to portray them and do it. His producing partner, Byron, I forgot Byron's last name. Byron passed away in a helicopter accident as they were location scouting, and was really affected. And he begged off the project. He didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore because he was so torn up.
Sure.
So he asked one of his friends, I believe his name is George Oak, Bartertown, and then these kids save the day. And then at the end, you're in like a high-octane chase scene.
Right.
Well, Warner Brothers asked George to come back and sort of amp up the action that Mad Max is known for. So he came back for that final chase scene with the train and then the plane taking off. So that was Max, but he really didn't direct it. This is probably, I would say, the first time that George Miller had a full budget, could do whatever he wanted with Mad Max. And in fact, the studio saw an early cut of it and gave George more money to go out and be more crazy with his chase scenes, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The other thing, the reason I'm looking forward to it is I just read the title because I'm trying not to get spoilers because I want to, I do want to see it. Kind of a feminist movie. I mean, you've got the female character played by, what's her name?
Charlize Theron.
Yeah, Charlize Theron. What did you think? Would you agree with that she's a real, strong female character, or what's your thoughts?
Yes, and I think you get this from the movie, so I don't think I'm giving anything away. But Max is helping Charlize Theron escape from Morton, who's the guy, or Joe. I'm sorry, Morton Joe, who's the guy with the CPAP. Is a reluctant hero. He doesn't really want to do this. He just kind of gets drawn into it.
Sure.
And Charlize Theron is the one who made a conscious decision to break away from Morton Joe. And she's high up in his army or what have you. So she's privileged, and she's choosing to make this run for it to sort of save the day. So, yeah, I would definitely say it's very, very feminine slant. Very much so.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I'm bummed I haven't had a chance to, but hopefully I'll be able to see it this weekend.
I think that about wraps up the news.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I blabbed on and on about the Comic-Con, and that took up a lot of our time, but it was such a great experience. I was glad to be able to share some of the other stuff that I didn't get to write about and you didn't see in the interviews. But
and it's a little different. Like, I know for Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, in the past, we've tried to get as many interviews as we can. And last year we tried something completely different where we tried to give sort of a man on the street, here's what it's like to be a Comic-Con. But with the writers, what I liked with what you did is you got to get an interview with Mark Hamill. And this is Mark Hamill for me because of old Star Wars. They had not mentioned anything about the new Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I was so stoked. But it was just one of the things where they sent it out to everybody, because at the time it's like, Mark Hamill, who is he? And I guess they got more of a response than they thought, so they started chopping people out of who could actually interview him. And I'm like, Alien, Kyle Reese in Terminator, and this great, super nice guy. Legendary interview, I could say, that really turned into a fantastic one.
Yeah,
that's why I really enjoyed the coverage.
It's a different experience to go to the smaller cons because you have less press covering it. So I'm sure I have more opportunities than you would at, like, say, San Diego Comic-Con, or even if I want to go to one in Chicago, and I don't have as high hopes as for getting as many interviews and stuff at those, because you're going to have, first, more big name actors who just don't give interviews out, and second, a lot more coverage there. So you're competing with a lot more, media people. So it's a unique opportunity. I really think it is, and I hope it remains as such for the next few years to come.
And that's a nice point for other nerdy dads out there, whether you're going to go by yourself or maybe take your kids along. Find those smaller conventions that you can go to that have names there that you want to meet, because you can get to them. You can say hi. You can introduce your kids to them. Yep. And they're a little more open and free and willing to do that at the smaller conventions. The bigger conventions, their time is taken, and it's not that they're trying to be jerks, or they're not jerks. It's just agents, that's their job, to be the jerk, and they get in the way. Throw some of your patronage to some of these smaller conventions. Look them up, find the ones that suit you.
Awesome. Well, I think that does it, man. Let's wrap this, and we'll be back again next week.
Seeing how I seem to have picked up a stutter today, I don't know what's wrong with me. Slow brain, I guess. Go check us out, nerdlocker.com, and all the other entities that we list every other time. And on YouTube and iTunes. Always, I'm Jimmy Palmquist and Jason Applegate.
Have a nerdy week.